Hi, I'm Lynn Morgan, your slipper-shod pastor, back with you after my vacation. You know, it's been more than a month since I recorded one of these little videos, and so I have to ask you, do I look different? Do I take a good look? Check the profile, the receding hairline. Do I look different? You may be thinking to yourself, gee, I wonder if he's fishing for compliments. He wants us to think that he's lost weight because he surely hasn't. No, I know I haven't, and I know I should. But no, I really don't look any different, do I? It's only been a month after all. But, well, the reason I asked the question is that I was reading a Bible story this morning about somebody who did look different. It's the story of the man born blind. It's in John chapter 9. I won't read the whole story for you. If you'd like to look at it yourself, feel free. It's a wonderful story of Jesus in which he is encountered by a person who had been born blind. And because of his disability, especially in that time and place, the person wasn't able to support himself. So he was a beggar. He lived just on the alms that people gave him. And it was not a very good life. And he asked Jesus for his healing, and in fact, Jesus gives him back his sight. But what happens after that is kind of what intrigues me. We're told the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is not this the man who used to sit and beg?" And some were saying, "It is he." But others were saying, "No, but it's someone who looks like him." And he kept saying, "I am the man." That little piece of the story is the one that intrigues me, because I think that there are things for us to think about in that little vignette. This person who had been born blind, who was healed of his blindness by Jesus, is somehow not completely recognizable by the people who had walked past him every day as he sat at the city gates to beg. His neighbors, his friends, the people in his community who had seen him repeatedly, upon whom he had depended for their gifts so that he could support himself. And they weren't sure after he was healed of his blindness that it was really him. Now we could attribute this to several things. First of all, that they couldn't quite believe that someone who had been born blind could be healed, and so it must be somebody else who looks like him. Others maybe didn't recognize him because that terrible sense in which people don't really recognize the full humanity and the reality of those who are disabled, and so that they'd never really paid attention to this person. And now they were seeing him as one of them, and he looked different to them. I suppose both of those things are possibilities as to why he wasn't recognized. But I think there is a third possibility, and that is that having been touched by Jesus and made whole, having been healed, he wasn't just a person who had received his sight and was remained unchanged otherwise, but he was really transformed. It was life-altering. It was personality transforming. It was something that just changed his whole life because he'd been touched by Christ. Well, you can see where I'm going with this, can't you? If we've been touched by Christ, maybe it ought to be something that makes a recognizable difference in us, that we ought to look different than we did before we received that grace, and that when people look at us, they ought to see some reflection of God's love and forgiveness, the mercy and acceptance that we've received that now we offer to others. And not just as individuals, but also as our community. That when people look at our church, they ought to say, that's not just some random assortment of people who have a similar ideology. This is a group of people bound together in love, and not just to spend on each other, but love that they spend on all those around them. We've been touched by Christ, and I know that it's made a difference in our lives. And so we need to be sure that we let that difference show, so that people can see the beauty of what God can do in human lives, even our very incomplete, our still broken and imperfect lives. They've been touched by grace, and so it ought to show on our faces and in the way that we carry ourselves. That's my prayer for myself and for you. Be at peace, my friends.